Many thanks for staying with us and welcome to Political Paradigm. I'm Victor Mathias. My guest on the show today is one who exudes confidence, flamboyance, and an astute politician. He's a federal lawmaker and he represents the people of Ideato South and North Federal Constituency in the House of Representatives. He is Ikenga Ugo Chinyere. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, so much has been going on in the country. But first of all, let's begin with the practicability of the agenda of the 10th House.
Well, the Abbas Kalu-led leadership said during the campaign that they are focusing on building a people's parliament that has high level of inclusion and will be focusing on using the instrument of the parliament in solving critical national problems. And they started in ensuring equitable distribution of privileges, equitable distribution of positions among all the geopolitical zones in terms of presiding officers. And recently, before we closed, the equitable distribution of chairmanship and deputy chairmanship of different committees. That has also given us high level of stability for a take-off stability. And before then, even while I was trying to settle down, we had over 400 bills that went through first reading. We have close to over 700 motions of critical national importance on the increment in pump price, on border clashes. We had almost over 100 motions on security challenges that were all over different parts of the country. And also very important is that he worked so hard on the legislative agenda, which will be formally presented once we return back from recess. So he has set the foundation, the leadership has set the foundation for us to actualize our people's parliament agenda. So it's workable, it's realizable, it's something that will be achieved. And they also know that the key challenges that the nation is facing as it has to do with reduction in cost of running government is paramount in our legislative agenda. How to see that there is efficient and effective running of things in the ministries and agencies of government, and how the parliament will use legislative intervention to limit the cost of running government. And also important is on the issue of security, which took the center stage during our first sitting before we went on recess. And also we screened the service chiefs to get them ready to the business of securing all parts of the country. And also, which is very critical, is a direction that has to do with political stability, political inclusions, and so on and so forth, which will form part of most of the bills that have crossed first reading. How to find economic reforms, how to find political reforms that will help to accelerate national development, inclusion, and stability. So I can tell you boldly that the Abbas and Kalule leadership is ready for the business of lawmaking that will have great impact on the lives of Nigerians. All
right, so let me begin to pick from some of the things you said, notable amongst which, you talked about security, you talked about the increase in price of fuel, and then you talked about the cutting of the cost of governance. Not too long ago, there was this figure being bandied around, as to how much, the National Assembly, actually appropriated to itself. And Nigerians are beginning to think, if we're making the sacrifice, why are we not seeing it from government officials first and foremost? How do you respond to this? How do you bridge this gap? How do you make Nigerians feel that, okay, this sacrifice is not only from the masses, but also from those at the helms of power?
Yeah, even though we are just starting and we have not had the first appropriation for the parliament for me to be able to have the entire details, but I can tell you from inquiries that I have made, starting with the issue that came when the president sent the palliative, and I was meant to understand that it was for National Assembly infrastructure, that they were dealing with both the projects they are running and so on and so forth. But it's also important from what I have been able to see when I came in, that when they talk about the budget of the National Assembly, maybe it's because of the way they communicate it to the public, and that is why Abbas launched the Open NAS project. And that Open NAS project is to make the National Assembly more transparent, make everything open and accessible for Nigerians to track what these expenditures are meant for. And I was able to now find out that maybe they have not communicated to let the people know, the agencies that are drawing from that subhead. Now you have the Public Complaint Commission that has offices in 36 states of this country and has 37 federal commissioners. They are under the National Assembly budget. So the entire staff you see at the Public Complaint Commission that have headquarters somewhere in Wusa or thereabout, and all the federal commissioners and the running of their state offices comes from that budget. So it's not like when people take a calculator, they divide it per head on lawmakers. No, you have to take into consideration that there's a full parastatal that is under the National Assembly, which is the Public Complaint Commission. Then you now have the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Study that recently opened their new headquarters in Abuja. Now, and other different centers. They even have a radio station and so on and so forth. The National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies also draws its budget directly from the National Assembly. And you know the workforce they have. They are doing those capacity buildings and training for people in government and lawmakers and so on and so forth. Then you have the National Assembly Library, which all over the world is supposed to be a center for knowledge and resource and capacity building and so on and so forth, that is building a permanent headquarters. They also draw from that budget. So if you remove the budget of the National Assembly Library, you remove the budget of the Public Complaint Commission, you remove the budget of the National Institute for Democratic and Legislative Studies, you now discover that what people say out there is erroneous when you look at the reality. I guess maybe it's because of the way it was communicated in the past. And I thank God that Abbas have the openness agenda, which will put these things on the table for people to understand. So I believe in the course of our budgeting process, which will be our first budget, we'll be able to see these details, and I can now speak authoritatively on them, especially the number of workforce those agencies have here.
Yeah, so what exactly is the reality now in terms of the cost of running the National Assembly?
And that's why I said, when you minus the cost that goes to the Public Complaint Commission, you minus the cost that goes to the National Institute for Democratic and Legislative Studies, you minus the cost that goes to the running of the National Assembly Library, and so on and so forth. That's when you can now arrive as what is left. And that information, like I told you, when we go through the first budget, we'll be able to see those details, and I can tell you that this particular amount goes here, this goes. So what you actually have left is this particular number. I can give you that information once we go through that process.
Well, I'll be holding you to your word, and of course, when that time comes, I'll get back to you on that. But let's look at the committee which you would chair when, of course, the House returns from recess. If I'm correct, it's Petroleum Resources Downstream. So I'm sure you would have seen in the news not too long ago, well, even this week, perhaps how we destroy, what's it called now? Crude stolen, from the Niger Delta. But I'll come to that in just a minute. But what's your take on modular refineries? What's the practicability of having modular refineries in the country?
Well, if you look at the PAA and everything that they did, was all aimed at deregulating that industry for us to be able to have competition, for us to have efficiency, effectiveness, and then revenue generation. Now, all over the world, it's not just the big refineries that you have all over the world. You have all different stages of refineries, all serving the same purpose of deregulating the industry to be able to get people to enjoy the gains. And more importantly, you cannot overstate the importance of those modular refineries. They are needed. Just like we can also not oversize the fact that we need the refineries to be running at full capacity also, so that the gains is very, very, is huge in terms of one, the pressure that we have on FS today. Almost 40% or 30% of the dollar that moves out is for importation of some of these products. And these are products that we are producing here, which will save us a lot of money refining them, plus the associated products that are associated with them. So it's very important. It's going to reduce pressure on our FS. And also, it's going to create jobs. You know what that's going to do in the communities that you're going to have those modular refineries. Not just the big refineries. This one is going to create jobs, reduce insecurity in those communities. And then the environment that is being destroyed, like when they burn those stolen crude, those things can be taken for them to be able to refine. You don't waste it. It's money, it's resources. And not only that, we're not going to have fuel at a competitive price. Now look at the amount that I said, because the price of fuel may possibly even go up again, because if the dollar rate goes up, possibly the price, because these importers are using dollar to import these products. But if we are refining this product, then we're going to strengthen the value of our naira. So it's very, very important, and it will help in realizing the government's economic agenda. It will create employment, it will reduce insecurity, it will put more money in the hands of our people, and it will reduce the pressure we are having on our affairs. So it is very important, it's timely, it's needed. And I guess that is why the framers of the PIA, put in those clauses that is aimed at breaking the industry to bring in competition, efficiency, and effectiveness.
Yeah. So just for the benefit of those who don't know, the PIA is, it's a Petroleum Industry Act. But again, as I was saying, speaking of, destroying the crude destroying the crude that has been stolen. So what can be done? I mean, what kind of legislation can be put in place to ensure that instead of, destroying it, it is maybe returned back to the reserve of the country, and then it is now done in a correct way, in the proper manner, where you now either use the modular refineries or you take it out and sell, gain FX. What kind of legislation can be, brought, maybe perhaps when you guys return from recess, to ensure that instead of destroying it, like you said, apart from destroying it, you also have environmental degradation, which the people of the Niger Delta have consistently complained about. And also, you also have the gas emissions. So we're having air pollution, we're having environmental degradation, and we're losing crude and even material at the same time.
You see, each time they talk about destroying, maybe there's something fishy that we don't know. Because let me tell you this. If you catch an armed robber that successfully robs a bank, and then you catch him with the naira and the dollar note, what do? You burn it? You don't burn it, you return it back. So if you see somebody with stolen crude, why go set it ablaze? Just like you said, it's destroying the environment, and you're wasting scarce national resources. So what you do is you take the crude, we have storage facility, both on land, offshore, and so on and so forth. So government have where they can store it, and then take it back to the mother refineries or the main refineries for them to be able to refine it, or for it to be properly shipped out of the country. So I think that's what most members of our deputy yesterday when we met said, we're going to investigate to find out the economic reason behind wasting those resources in the name of, or is it that somebody says, oh, we are burning it, and possibly takes it and does something with it. So we're going to find out why, how does it stand economically for you to waste it, something that is going to change life, something that is going to generate revenue. So there's no need even for a legislation. We're not going to make law for every mistake people are making. It's all about administrative direction, that if you get it, you put it in the storage because it's government property, then you ship it the right way. So there's no basis for you to say you are going to burn it, unless there's something that goes on that we don't, and we intend to find out why they keep destroying it.
Well, I'm sure Nigerians will also be interested in finding out why all of that is happening. But now, looking at security, you also made mention security. Let me still stay in the Niger Delta, where we currently have private security entities guarding this national resource. It's akin to having state police, in a way. What's your take on that? Should private entities be taking care or guarding such national treasure, or should we deploy our own security apparatus as the nation's security apparatus to checkmate any form of oil bunkering and theft going on in that industry?
I think over time, governments, in the past have always this idea of committee approach to national problems. You have a problem on security, you set up a committee. You have a problem on why there is mortality or high mortality rate, you set up a health committee by the government and so on and so forth. I think this idea of using vigilante or community thing should not be raised too high to undermine the competence and the role our nation's security is supposed to be playing in protecting our critical national infrastructure and our national security. The Navy is well equipped. What do we have the Nigerian Navy? They're supposed to be the masters of our waterways. That's how, like the British Navy, that matters of the global waterways. So if we have the Nigerian Navy, we have the Nigerian Armed Forces, we have the soldiers, we have the Air Force and so on and so forth, that have area capacity for surveillance and so on and so forth. So why do we not need to be laying emphasis? I'm not saying that you don't need community involvement in monitoring and surveillance, yes. But my point is that I think we are over-raising it to become like an alternative to what our Navy is supposed to be doing. Navy is supposed to be in front. The soldiers, the Air Force officers, they're supposed to be in front, working with these independent contractors but you don't make the independent contractor to now be the sole provider or like the major provider of security for our waterways for sake of national security, because these are individuals that you don't know who is training them, where they are coming from. We need them because of maybe they understand the terrain and so on and so forth. But the Navy should be given their prime position in mastering the safety of our waterways. So mine is that they emphasize the importance they are laying on these private organizations. They should be involved, but our security agencies that have been trained, that we spend so much on every day, should be in the forefront of leading in providing those, not just only on our waterways. It's happening in most states now, where you see people boldly saying now they run private contracting firms, security contracting firms, like the Wagner Group, like the South African machineries. Remember, these things have their own disadvantages, because these are individuals that we don't even have their database, we don't even know who they are. Tomorrow, when they don't have that contract, how do we decommission them? Where are they going to go to? So that's why I feel government should be on top of it. People should not just be interested in the economic aspect of awarding such private, contracts and so on and so forth. We should look at the long-term implication, because even in countries where you have those Wagner Group or South African machineries, we hear stories of the kind of atrocities they commit.
They go rogue sometimes.
Yes, at times. And then some of them even try to topple government at times. So they must find a way to ensure that our armed forces are in the front, and our armed forces have data of the people that are involved in providing these services, whether it's the DSS or the Army or the Navy. They should have the data, and they should be involved in their training. It should not be run like it's a private thing, so that tomorrow they don't turn into something that we cannot control. Remember what happened in Sudan, where the paramilitary group later decided to take over government and started fighting with the armed forces because they have been empowered. So that's why there must be control. So I'm worried about the activity, not just on the waterways, but also in states where they are complaining of reckless activities by some of those non-state actors who are providing security.
Well, clearly you're not happy with what is going on there, and it's good that it's someone like you, who is going to head that House committee. So would you be doing anything in terms of legislation? Because that's the only way things can change. We need to pass a law to ensure that all of these recommendations you've made, are adopted nationally. So what would you be doing to change the narrative?
Right now, we are studying deeply the PIA, because there are some areas that may be, areas of conflict, areas of overlap, and so on and so forth, and areas that will also help to increase more level of supervision. I'm not going to go into details about them, but I can tell you that there might be need for us to go by, because the pressure with the passing of the PIA and the way it was rushed at the last minute to be able to be achieved, which is a commendable effort. But now, sitting down and looking at some of the sections, there are some of them that have to be also amended to make them more efficient, more independent, more accountable, and more effective. We'll be looking at that. There's some other ones may have to go by way of oversight and by way of motions and so on and so forth. But definitely there will be a lot of legislative actions geared towards making the petroleum industry, especially the downstream sector, more transparent, more efficient, more effective, to realize the ultimate goal of economic growth and our people to be able to access those services without emptying their pockets is very important.
Yeah, so would one of those legislative actions be looking into the cleanup, of these places that already, are suffering from degradation, loss of flora and fauna, loss of, what's it called now? Marine beings, so to speak, fishes and all of that. A lot of people have lost their livelihood, based on all of this. With this legislative action,
some of these
revisiting.
Some of these things, working with the other committees that have related functions. Yeah. For instance, this is the first time the PIA is coming into full operation. Now we're having the host communities. We have a house committee on host communities. And the essence of that host community percentage is to be able to address the direct impact of this exploration and the impact of what the oil industry is having on those host communities, because they had the NDDC, which now oversees the larger states of those oil producing area. But it seems that more attention is not being paid to the communities where these activities are directly going on, and which is why the PIA now made a provision for those host communities to be taken care of with those percentage. Working with our colleagues, we ensure that the essence of having that inclusion in the PIA is achieved by the direct impact those resources will have on the communities that is helping our nation generate this revenue. Because if you go to some of these areas, you will cry. You say some of them are living like subhumans, kind of. The environment is gone, the means of livelihood is gone, you don't even have access to it. And this is the place where what is making all these lights and all these roads we have in Abuja and Lagos and the embassies functioning all over the world to be working. So how come we don't pay serious attention? Because tomorrow night, if there is no oil, what will happen to those communities? They can't even farm. So that's why we'll be paying attention on the activity, not just the downstream, both the upstream and midstream, working together with our colleagues to ensure that those communities deserve the remedial measures that they require in solving their problem. More importantly, government has put in a lot of money in terms of remedying these environments. Questions will be asked. Apart from the Ogoni cleanup, we are aware of, huge investment that government have made. Even there's this one they call decommissioning of the wellheads and so after operation, which is supposed to remedy and restore the environment to the status that they met it before the operation. But if you go to some of these areas, you still see that these places are bad. So you ask yourself, what was those monies used for? So we're going to look at the impact these things are having on the environment and what government have done in the past and whether those resources were judiciously used for what they were budgeted for. Definitely there's going to be a lot of legislation, a lot of oversight, a lot of motions and amendments to ensure that these destructions we can save the environment. You can see what's happening all over the world with the climate change and so on and so forth. So the environment is being destroyed both on the land, on the sea, and in the air.
So we're going to be seeing a lot of probes.
Yeah, a lot of, I don't want to use the word probe. I just feel there is a lot of work that needs to be done. People must answer certain questions. We're going to look deeply into the books. We're going to, do a lot of findings aimed at one, finding a way to make these things sustainable, finding a way for people to ensure that the monies or resources that were appropriated we are judiciously used. We're definitely going to look at that. We're going to look at a lot of things. So when the committee is inaugurated, definitely we'll look at a whole lot of things. For instance, it cannot justify that you use over 5 trillion to subsidize fuel that people never even bought at the subsidy price. Because the subsidy regime have ended, does not mean that those public resources will not be accounted for us to be sure that the ship that you said came to Lagos and offloaded those products actually came to Lagos. And then you have to show evidence to show that you even paid for the product for which we are paid. And then the people that were doing the bridging gap for the transportation and so on and so forth. Because if you find out that a particular ship that they say came to Nigeria to offload, at the time they said it was offloading, maybe it's a decommissioned ship in the belly of the Atlantic in the Indonesian waters. And then it means that not only some people sat down and criminally defrauded the country, that somebody also collected a bridging gap for the trucking. Because what were you trucking from Lagos to Kaduna and Kano if the ship never came? And that means that they go to the extent of payment papers will be forged, custom papers may be forged, refinery papers may be forged. So we may have to look deep.
There is a value chain in there.
Yes. And it shows high level of, it's not even a criminal offense, it's high treason. It's the highest level of criminality that people that are involved, not only recovery, but are supposed to be in jail. So we're not going to say, oh, because the president have removed the subsidy regime, so therefore anything that happened before that time, then let's go to bed. No, because we're talking about revenues that is over trillions, over 5-10 trillions paid. And then at the end of the day, people that are supposed to enjoy those products and services never enjoyed it. They were still buying at the regular market prices. And at the end of the day, we are owing. And then even the FS that was given to somebody, because if somebody collected FS and did not import products, it means that he went and offloaded it back to the black market and became a billionaire overnight. We will look at that. It's going to be a challenging moment. It's going to be tough. But definitely, somebody for once will do it. And we intend to do that so that it will also help to recover revenue, help to also serve as deterrent to other people who want to abuse government opportunities, and then at the end of the day, the poor masses will be suffering. Yes, it's a technical industry. It's an industry that is not 100% transparent, but we'll do as much as possible using the instrument of the parliament because we represent the people of Nigeria to ask those hard questions. Because that is so painful that the reason we have to run away from it is because the process was abused. That's why we have to remove subsidy. Because the cartel was so deep that no matter the reform you try to introduce, you still end up with the same problem. It's a good thing the president have shown the boldness and have removed it, but now you can see the impact. But what the people want to see is, was this money actually committed. These monies were they actually committed to those things.
Yeah.
And I can tell you to some extent, they were not. And if you see somebody, for instance, putting up a paper for a payment, and these are something that have documentary evidence. Your ship is supposed to come from somewhere.
It should dock. There should be evidence. There should be paperwork that it has docked.
In that case, you paid for the product.
Yeah.
There should be the transfer documents. It means that you hire the ship that moved the vessel.
If you don't own it.
If you don't own it, then you can also from the Lloyd Bank you can see the locations of these ships. So these things are very, very easy and transparent. Yes, but people don't want to deal with it maybe because of vested interest. I don't have any vested interest. I'm not into oil and gas. But the most important thing here is that we need to find out from the moment you say you paid, from that bank where you paid, to the moment the vessel was loaded, to the moment the vessel set sail on the high sea down to Nigeria, to the moment you offloaded, and then the moment the trucking started going on and the bridging. So if, for instance, you never imported, in that case, you forged documents showing that MT vessel 1 was here. That is the highest level of forging. In that case, you as well forge the payment paper, forge the custom paper, and forge also the trucking papers. So you can see it's a chain that if you do thorough investigation, we may be able to recover over 2-3 trillion that can help the government in fast-tracking their programs. Well,
you may be running away from saying probes, but it seems we're going to have interesting times ahead, in the 10th Assembly, and of course, the probes would actually happen.
But again, it's all about asking the right questions.
Yeah.
And again, we have run
which is still a probe.
Turnaround of the refineries yearly for over 10-15 years. Now we need to know at what capacity are they producing vis-a-vis the expenditures that have been made on them. Now we need to also see what the company that is rehabilitating and refurbishing is doing. We also have to look at the capacity to be effective in terms of, like Kaduna Refinery, we hear that are built for heavy crude or something like that, and then most of they need to import some of them from Venezuela or something. So whether the kind of crude we produce here is something that the refinery can be able to be refining in large quantity. If not, what do we do so that we don't keep committing money to things that will not work? So we have to take a look at that. Not only that, we also take a look at petroleum associated product, because it's not just the fuel, there's other products,
byproducts.
Petrochemicals that come out from that. So you have the heavy naphtha, you have the different spirits and so on and so forth. So some of them, are they being sold as scrap? Are we making revenue from, discharging some of those things? And if we are, what's the evidence of the payment of the revenues we're getting from them? These questions the committee intends to ask, because so in different places, some of them can be used for generating electricity. Chinese have heavy market for some of those products. Also, we have to ask questions. Is government paying for the disposal? If government is paying for the disposal of a product that have a high market value, then who is selling it? So all this is because we want to help government to raise revenue. One of the biggest challenges the government is facing today is how to raise revenue. And most of these things is because of high cost of running government or systematic corruption that keeps getting us to be wasting a lot of revenue. So government is trying to do everything possible to raise revenue, to be able to meet up with competing demands. And the committee intends to help government to not only block the leakages, but also to increase capacity to generate revenue. It's going to be a very hard
clearly your committee has its work cut out for it. From all that you've said, there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of hard questions to be asked, since you don't want to use the word probe. And there are a lot of investigations to be made as well. But that's on the government side. Nigerians were wondering now, especially with the hike, in the price of petrol, at what point would they see some reprieve? Because if you look at the fact that the minimum wage, hasn't gone anywhere, fuel has increased to almost 300%. Inflation, double digits. The indices around the increase in the hike of fuel, price of fuel, they don't just tally. So what would be done to see that Nigerians, have some buffer, some reprieve, from the hardship that they're currently facing?
Now, I'm very realistic. First, if we want reform in the petroleum industry, which is the reason why the PIA came, in that case, it's no longer a regulated market. It is now a deregulated market. That means that economic prices of demand and supply and availability and so on and so forth will set in. But the question now, how do we ensure that it doesn't keep rising every day? That means we have to move it away from being determined by FS fluctuations. That means...
Or what they've called market forces.
Market forces. That means we'll bring local competitions. This product has to be refined here. Whether modular refineries, whether the main refineries, and so on and so forth, they must locally work here, create employment, and then be able to strengthen the naira. That means we can find price stability. It's no longer controlled by international market forces. The crude is generated here, it goes to the refinery, we refine, and then we also have to now start working to make not just getting the refineries back, but the pipelines that will move this product from, let's say, for instance, Port Harcourt Refinery to Aba Depot to Enugu Depot. You know, the old days where the Aba Depot, the Enugu Depot, the Kaduna Depot, the Sokoto Depot, they used to work effectively. There's a lot of businesses going around that area. We have to refurbish all these pipelines ahead of the time.
At what cost?
That's why, you know, government most times may not even, there's companies all over the world that will be willing to do build, operate, and transfer because it's something that generates revenue. You do those pipelines and those depots, as you're selling the fuel, they are deducting certain percentage, maybe within a period of 10, 15, 20 years or 50 years, they can hand the facility back. So it's something that is economic. There can be a lot of independent financing. So you get them running so that at the end of the day, once the refineries come back, the pipelines are working because the roads are not that strong to be moving this product. It costs us a lot of money. Once the pipelines are working, the one from Port Harcourt to Enugu is about 200 and something kilometers or thereabout. Government can start working on getting them back to start running ahead of time. But also you need to understand the fact that there must be some level of transparency on how these prices are. Yes, they are determined by market forces, but we have to be sure that there's no gang up. It's very important because people feel like there's a gang up. People feel like there is something they don't know. So we must find a way to make the industry more transparent for us to understand the template with which they arrive at the 600 and something that government is talking about. How much is your shipping? How much did you get the FS at? How much did you get the vessel? How much did you get the storage at the tank farm and so on and so forth? These issues will be determined for Nigerian people to understand whether this price is real or whether there is anything that has to do with this price, even though it's a market forces regulated transactions. But the government owes the people a duty to be able to ensure that the people are not taken advantage of. So that we also do. But in the meantime, we have to, I don't want to use the word endure, but the reality here is that on one hand, we cannot remove subsidy, and on the other hand, we want to control the pricing. That is, for you to get foreign investment into the sector, if you say it's deregulated, then you should allow market forces to determine. But government can also intervene. For instance, we used to have national reserve or something. There's supposed to be national reserve, but we tend to find that even if where there is some problem, the NNPC or the government can inject more into the market to be able to stabilize the price and so on and so forth. So when we start to work, we'll take a deep look at some of these issues to be able to find a way that even though it's an open market, but how do we ensure that the people are not taken advantage of? And also how do we support the industry in terms of infrastructure growth to enable the needed competition and effectiveness that will bring price stability. Like you have all over the world, there's always price stability because of that competition. And then some of the people that have collected license. So we don't get into like what people used to do in the past. You take license for refining or importation or something, and you go and put it in your file and looking for somebody to give it to. We also have to take a look at the licensing regime that government has done over time. Who are the people who took this license? And then is there no time frame within which? Because you're supposed to have the financial capacity for it to have gone into what they gave you a license for. Because if you have 1,000 people with license and we still doesn't even have up to 10 refineries that are working, then we may have to look at how to review all these things to ensure that those who have the financial capacity and technical capacity are given access into the industry, which is the reason why it is an open market for them to be able to build the needed infrastructure to get this. Let me tell you, for the fact that we produce this raw product, everywhere in the world, we're not supposed to be complaining about it because we have the raw material that people are taking abroad, and then we are buying the finished one that doesn't even come with other associated material that is supposed to go with the petroleum resources.
So this is a critical example of hungry in the midst of plenty.
100%. So we'll have to find a way to get it refined so that there's other, not just the fuel, there's other things that can give Nigeria billions of dollars in revenue if we're the ones refining it here.
Yes. So I mean, in all of this, a lot of people say that, well, this phrase was made very prominent, some years back, that when you fight corruption, corruption will fight back. Are you scared?
I have been.
How head on would you fight on in case you're being fought while taking all of this, while asking those hard questions, doing those investigations and carrying out these probes?
I've been a social crusader for over 15 years, and I'm a hard puncher when there is need. And I'm also diplomatic also when the need for that arises. If you talk about somebody frightening me, somebody intimidating me, somebody trying to blackmail me, somebody trying to stop me from pursuing a people interest-driven goal without making me to understand the reason why I should see it from his own angle, I can tell you that is zero. Nobody can do that to me. Nobody. I can tell you that with all level of authority. Nobody can do that. So, but the most important thing is that we're not going to witch hunt anybody. We'll ask the right questions. We're coming on a friendly note. It's just to ask the right questions. Why is this here? Why is it not here? It's just to provide answers. So if people, yes, corruption fights, but people try to scandalize it, that one wouldn't matter. It's not the first time. In all my political struggle, people do that as a way to get away from answering the right questions. I will ignore you because it doesn't matter. What matters is for you to answer the questions, whether I have the legal authority and the legislative platform to ask you those questions. If I have, I'm going to ask you those questions. So you better come prepared to convince me on why this is the situation or what we can do to better the situation.
Well, again, I have to say that interesting times pretty much await us, in the 10th Assembly, especially in terms of tackling oil theft and all of that. But let's look at another general thing, from what things that you made mention, which is part of the agenda of the 10th Assembly, which is tackling insecurity in the country. I mean, on a region-by-region basis, we have issues. If you talk about, insurgency in the northeast, banditry in the northwest, oil theft, and militancy in the south, in the southeast as well, separatists also. What is the plan generally?
We, on our own, as lawmakers of like minds that you saw when we met with the Chief of Army Staff, we've advocated that there's need for paying serious attention to issues of national stability and unity. Now, justice issues, social injustice, political injustice, economic injustice, and so on and so forth. Breeze is like a training ground for some of these dissidents. Now, we want to see a government that is all-inclusive in terms of addressing the root causes of these failures that is worsening insecurity, political stability, economic stability, level playing field for everybody. But more importantly, you need to agree with me that our security situation in Nigeria started worsening when the local government system of administration was basically destroyed. That level of government has some level of control it had on our people. It made government accessible to the rural people. It made our youth engage in agriculture, in farming, in different types of skill learning, and so on and so forth. It was like all over Nigeria, the local system of administration was totally wiped out. It doesn't exist. And there's no way government at the state or national level can address what is happening in those hinterland. There are some of the roads today that are being destroyed by erosion. These are roads that if there was local government system, they could have built culvert, just ordinary culvert, to have stopped the water flow in going the wrong direction. But you now go to the rural areas, all the roads are gone because there is no local administration. And part of the cause is activities of the governor. At times people have to be bold to say the right thing. You cannot have government at the state and then have government at the federal, and then you have government at the local area, which is the only link between the people and the governed, and then you wipe it out, and then people are doing deductions monthly from that money, and then you go to local government, you do not even understand what these monies are being used for. It's even center of unity and support to primary school system and secondary school system. So first thing first, I expect this government to do is to take the bold step of stopping what the governors are doing, to find a way to restore the independence and effectiveness of the local government administration. They used to work closely with the traditional rulers. Nobody enters the local government or community without the people knowing it's a strange element. They used to have their vigilante and so on and so forth. They could have reduced the level of the security failures in those local governments, whether from Zamfara, whether to Imo State, whether to Anambra, and so on and so forth. So we need to find a way to return to that system. And then we need to also find a way to get community involvement in security, which is even if you have the local government system working, you don't need to do that. They have their local government security council meetings and so on and so forth. But when governors, appoint political talks and political friends, sole administrator, transition committee chairman, TC, all sort of names they call it, and then they take instruction from Owerri, and some of them are Abia or Enugu or somewhere, and then some of them are only giving money to pay for salary, and then other security activities that are supposed to be done. Go and see the divisional police headquarters that they used to support. All of them are like, desert area. So we have to go from the foundation to restore the local government system, to get our people involved. When we get them involved, because every security challenge you are seeing today comes from a particular local government. These people are moving in the rural areas. So if you get the rural areas functioning again, they can be able to work strongly with the state and the federal government to be able to nip those activities in the bud. And youths will be trained in different skills in their rural area. They don't need to migrate to the city center and so on and so forth. You can see that 70% of the people involved in these criminal activities, most of them are poor. They are struggling to find what they will eat. That's why it's easy to recruit them, whether in the Boko Haram one, whether in the banditry one, whether in the illegal miner one, whether in the one doing insurgency in different parts of the country. Most of them, if they have gone to school, if they have one strong skill or the other, maybe they will not have found themselves in what they are doing that is also undermining the national security. And also, which is very important, we may have to go back to the issue of state police. I know what is frightening people is the abuse that governors are already showing, even with vigilante groups. So one will be wondering now, if because of this you give them state police, when they put it in their pocket and then use it to be filing murder charges and treason charges against their political opponents, like I went through in Imo State. So such things, frightens Nigerians. Whenever you mention state police, they will remember, what used to go on in those states and whether people can trust them to have that decency to allow those institutions. So we must find them, even if we must do them, to make those institutions independent of the control of the governors.
So in all of this, are you asking for, because you said the traditional or the community needs to be involved? Yes. Are you calling for a constitutional role for traditional rulers? Already,
the speaker has already promised that, and he discussed that one extensively with me about giving the traditional rulers strong role in national development, whether by virtue of constitutional amendment and so on and so forth. But like I told you before, if you have the local government system working, you can bring all those things under the local government system, because the traditional rulers are domiciled in those domains. You don't need to bring it as a national issue. So you can make those constitutional amendments, but definitely their funding and their support and their reporting system will be with the democratically elected local government administration in each of the local governments in the country. Yeah. And when these local governments are working now, those feeder roads, those solar lights, grading of road, and control of erosion. These things can be controlled at a small level before it gets to this big level where everybody is now looking up to the Ecological Fund Office or Ministry of Environment for intervention. Some of the ones that started in our place in Idato, Umuchima, Isiokpo, Akboro, and so on and so forth, Amanato, these are things that if there was a local government system, maybe by covert, by erosion, the erosion remedial systems and so on and so forth, some of these things could have been controlled when they were just small lines. But because government did not come, there was no local government system working, the thing kept on expanding that today we don't even have a road to that. It has finally cut off yesterday.
Wow. Who would fix that?
We are crying to the federal government night and day. And we are praying, because the governor, his wife comes from the area, that even if you don't like our people, for the sake of your wife, find a road for her to go home and get the place working. But we're all intervening here at the federal level. We have written to the president, to the SGF, the environment, and we have moved the necessary motion, and we are pursuing it to get the federal government to include it in the 2024 budget to be able to save our people, because it's completely cut off and it keeps expanding. The homes or land line is getting inside the gully every day. Yesterday it went off completely. What went off is not, the main road have gone off since. The bypass have caved in. So there's even no road into that particular place.
Well, let's hope that your interventions, your pleas, and your continued move to ensure it's fixed, pays out in the long run. But still looking at security, let's look at regional security. We see what's going on in Niger and the Republic of Niger, of course, and of course the president has, as part of ECOWAS, made some recommendations and some asks. What's your take on that?
As somebody that believes in democracy and democratic system of governance, I find it very difficult to, give any support to any government that is not democratically elected, especially military takeover of government. Even though there's something that people are saying which is important, that the method with which African leaders get into office must also be democratic. In such a way, we will all be committed to the principle of free, fair, and credible election. Most of these countries that have been toppled, whether Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, you will see the complaints that were coming during their general elections. And also this, I call it a stupid attitude. Well, what is this stupid attitude? You come into office, you do 2 terms, and the next thing in your mind is to change the constitution for you to remain in office. If those people that were there before you did that, will you be in office? We're not running monarchy. If you want, you can change the constitution of your country to monarchy. Look at people like Akwatra that people have so much confidence in. Look at what he did. The same thing Babo did. You came back again, you are changing the constitution. So when you keep on changing the constitution, destroying democratic system of government, because it's not fair. You are like a player, a referee, a judge in a game that you are involved. Look at Cameroon now. He basically runs Cameroon Biya from Switzerland. So tomorrow now, if somebody topples him, people will definitely start shouting, are you getting me? So that is why I said it's important that the process we get into office, the process will continue to remain in office is also important. But having said that, I don't see the reason why nobody should be encouraging a presidential guard that is entrusted, that is under oath to defend the president with their life. We need to understand that presidential guard is supposed to be like your wife, your child. That's the last level of trust. At times they operate different from the regular army. You know, waking up in the morning and the man you are told to guard you, lock him inside and say you have taken over government. If we encourage that, other small, weak countries in Africa, not just the Francophone countries, other ones, that the presidential guard may lock the president inside the room and say he's not the president.
And it will have a domino effect on Nigeria.
You can see they are forming a union. Is already, you can see the way Burkina Faso is reacting, you know, Chad is reacting, the other ones are reacting, like a forum of people who have taken over a democratic system of governance. So if you allow them to keep getting away with it, then it will be a new movement in Africa where people will take over, and it will affect Nigeria. It's also important, I understand the concerns of people that, you know, resorting to military action will have a spillover effect, especially on the border towns of KB, Sokoto, Katsina, Kano, so on and so forth, and insecurity might increase. But having a weak system of government, a military system of government all over this area, can also undermine security in those areas and continue to worsen activities of insurgent group who may not recognize them in the long run. So that's why I said, yes, let them find a middle ground to resolve this matter. But, and also, I don't like the rhetoric coming from Niger. You know, seeing the military junta trying to insult Nigerian people and their sovereignty because you don't like the position of ECOWAS. It's not a Nigerian thing, it's an ECOWAS thing. So seeing Niger that, you know, their military strength is not up to 25,000, talking to somebody that is about 200,000 soldiers and somebody that have sustained you in terms of electricity, that you don't even pay your electricity bill, your oil in Nigeria, sustains in terms of trying to even invest our national wealth in reviving Lake Chad for you. We are putting a lot to help them to stabilize, because each time you try to help them to stabilize, they mess it up again, and then talking tough because somebody somewhere, Tichani wants to hold power. I feel insulted about that. Left alone, I'm not the president, but if you talk like that, then definitely I will find a way to deal with your problem. But like I said, we should be mindful of the humanitarian crisis that will arise out of a military action. But at the same time, we need to stop the attitude of young army officers in West Africa thinking that once they don't like a government in power, even the presidential guard can lock the president in, so that we don't wake up one day and somebody does that kind of thing in Nigeria or Ghana or somewhere. So we must understand the need to preserve democratic institutions. We must also understand that African leaders must ensure that the product of a democratic, free, fair, and credible election is also very, very important. But that is not a justification for a presidential guard to lock his president inside the bedroom and say he has taken over power. So we must look at all these, you know, variables and be able to find a solution that will be in the utmost interest of the national security of Nigeria, advancement of democracy in Africa. But what ECOWAS is already doing, that is a good one. But ECOWAS must also find a way to ensure that that ECOWAS protocol on democracy that said the leaders, the only way to ascend power in Africa must be through a free, fair, and credible election, that all over ECOWAS Africa, that is upheld, including independence of judiciary, that protocol also demands. When we have this in place, we will now have more moral authority to clamp down on coups anywhere that are found in Africa. But at the same time, I condemn what Tichani and his group did in Niger, and they should vacate power and allow the democratic president that was elected to continue what he was elected to do.
Well, time will tell, and hopefully that would happen. He would be taken out, in a way that everyone would, applaud, be it by ECOWAS or personal remediation. But, speaking of which, speaking of democratic elections, free, fair, credible elections, and all of that, around the world, 11/11 is seen as a day, that ended the war. That was the day, I think, the war ended, the armistice. So it was a day, everyone decided, okay, we have to stop. But 11/11/2023, well, you should tell us about it. I mean, what are your chances? What are the chances of your party in the upcoming governorship elections?
Well, I will start by saying that the atmosphere for a credible and fair election in Imo is not yet set. We have a system that has been militarized by government, security apparatus, and non-state actors. Those, like we said, who are providing security services like Wagner Group and South African machineries. So you cannot have a free and fair election in Imo with South African and Wagner Group kind of security machineries there. People cannot freely campaign. People cannot freely do their activities. People are arrested. As I speak to you now, maybe you've heard, a journalist, the Colonel Sonkwa, was abducted and taken to Abuja and is in the police command. If he says something that the governor does not like, you have heard him for almost going to a week or 2 weeks. The Inspector General of Police, people had so much confidence and hope when he was coming. Charge the man to court if you feel there's something he did. You don't just, show this authority of you arrest somebody, then you put him in detention. People are being arrested every now and then. And all the extrajudicial killing in Imo, nobody's investigating. Nobody's even coming to the aid of Imo people. I've been a victim severally, 4 assassination attempts that can boldly tell you here we are state government backed. And nobody for one day have invited one person, even the last one of the man. Has that
been proven?
And I'm telling you, nobody have even done one single investigation.
So how did you prove that
when the governor Ed called me and threatened to harm me, and the next thing my uncle is beheaded, we came under attack, not once, not two. The ones I had the videos that I shared to even including channels of even when they invaded on video. So the point is that there's of so much insecurity in the state. How are you going to have a credible election? So I'm feeling that it is deliberate to continue to make him have that air of insecurity so that possibly people can go and write a result. So we have to restore security. We have to allow people to freely move, freely do their activities before you can even talk. This is a place where somebody, one municipal had 12,000 accreditation, and the result with which somebody was declared winner was 70,000. And the man that was robbed went to INEC to collect the CTC to go to tribunal. As he was coming out, he was adopted by these state and non-state actors and taken to detention so that he will miss the time for filing his appeal. That is the same place where the judges have to run for their life because they were being threatened and they have to move to Maraba where they are sitting.
Have you petitioned the IGP, the CDS?
Of course, the IG as I'm talking to is aware that Chinonso Onkwa is in his detention, is in Maitama. I have made inquiries in Maitama division of the Nigerian Police Force. So it is left for the IG, everybody has said it, we have written, to find a way to look into the matter. If there is an offense, you charge him to court. And more importantly, we have to disband the activities of the Bubago. And I'm saying this boldly. People may be scared of saying that, but I cannot, because people are threatening people not to tell you this, that they have worsened instead of helping the security situation. And this, I will personally appeal to the DGDSS to look into what they're doing in Imo. Imo is not a no man's land. Ask your reporters in the world, can they aid their views? Can they, even to do NUG election, you can't have free and fair election. To do NSC election, you have talks going to scatter one, and one is on this side. You remember when they attacked judges of the industrial court? Judges were carried and put in the boot of the car. Have you forgotten that the industrial court is not sitting in the world today? So people are scared of saying this, but I cannot, because I've come face to face with this death. I knew it was just like this, the bullet passed, and my uncle was beheaded because of all these things. So a lot of other people, I'm not saying my uncle is more important than other people who have died, but the federal government must consider Imo as a matter of national security, what is going on. All I'm asking is an inquiry. Get all the people who have been there as director of DSS, as police commissioner. Okay, today you are aware that the man who went to rob Adamawa people of his victory, remember the CP who escorted the wreck that declared that woman winner. Remember the story Benani. That the Binani for which the wreck is facing prosecution. Are you aware that they removed that CP in Imo and we are being told that he's back to Imo, CP Bade? I will tell you that boldly. And this is the man that has been involved in everything that happened in that state. So the IG, people are looking up to him. If the man is Owerri, how can a man that the REC is facing treason charges and election offense charges, and then the CP that gave him the security backing is in Imo, and you're asking me here, will November election be free and fair in Imo, when the man who went to rob Adamawa people of his victory is sitting as the commissioner of police? If Ikenga said, will only
have you petitioned? I think you should petition.
We have petitioned. The IG is aware of this, and whosoever that is sending him back to Owerri must have the intention of not allowing Imo people to vote. So we need to, and I'm appealing to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to look into this Imo issue. It's not a question of party where you belong. It's about survival of democracy. It's about people's lives that are being wasted every day. Each time I talk on this, the next thing you see protests on the Owerri, they will declare me person non grata. They'll be saying all sorts of things. But that cannot stop me. The duty as a messenger of the people. I represent the people who live in fear every day, who doesn't have a road to their place because there's somebody somewhere who wants to remain as a leader of the place. So you have to look into this. I played the recordings of even the threat. So we need to draw a difference between the non-government and the non-government, and government must look into it.
Well, let's hope that government will look into it. Let's hope that you persist in your petitions to the IGP, to the CDS, to the DG of SSS, and also ultimately to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. That's the President, Bola Tinubu. But I'm afraid this is where we'll have to hold the conversation. Thank you so very much for coming on the show, sharing your thoughts. It's been very much eye-opening, and hopefully we'll look forward to all of the questions being asked, that will be asked, the investigations that will be made, the probes that will be carried out. But again, I have to say thank you for coming on the show, and hopefully before 11/11/2023, all of these issues that you've made mention of will be sorted out, and a free, fair, and credible election will be held. And also would have a date that would celebrate globally, just like the 11/11, where all of this coupists in Africa would down their arms, and democratically elected presidents will be returned to power. Again, I have to say thank you for joining us on the show. Ikenga Ugo Chinyere, federal lawmaker and chairman House Committee, Petroleum Resources Downstream. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And that's where we wind down on the show. That's where we drop the anchor as well. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm Victor Matthias. It's bye for now.